Around 7 in the morning on November 13, 2015, in Minot, North Dakota, a panicked call pierced through to 911.
911, what is the address of your emergency?
I just got home, my back door is kicked in, and my girl ain't answering the phone.
Christopher Jackson, his voice breaking, told Minot police that his fiancée, Angila Shannon Wilder, wasn't answering her phone. Stumbling home from a night shift, he froze as he saw the back door kicked wide open. He shouted for her and their 2-year-old son, but a screaming silence answered, dread surging as he dialed for help. Less than a minute later, Minot police raced to the scene, finding Christopher, 32, eyes red and breath ragged. He yelled to rush inside, but they held him back, his trembling hand pointing toward the house. The response team stepped in, greeted by a tidy warmth pictures of Angila and her kids lining the walls, a home once alive with joy, now eerily still. Her name echoed down the hall, unanswered, a gnawing unease rising within them. In the nursery, a 19-month-old boy peered from his crib, his clear eyes a stark contrast to the storm brewing. The bedroom door stood locked, defiant. They rushed the baby to Christopher, who clutched him with a frantic heart, nodding for them to break in. The door shattered under the force of 2 officers, light flooding the darkness, revealing blood streaked across the sheets and empty bed. Then they froze. Angila lay there, lifeless in a pool of crimson, her neck and chest torn by countless stabs, her face etched with the terror of her final breath. Beyond the walls, the morning school drop-off spiraled into chaos. A close friend and neighbor of Angila, ushering her kids across the street, turned back, her heart seizing as police tape stretched around the house. She ran to an officer, voice trembling with fear, but got only a curt shake of the head. "We don't know yet, just that it's not right." Tears streamed down as she thought of Angila, gentle, warm, a woman who lit up every room. Born in California, Angila Shannon Wilder grew up amid the quiet streets of Phoenix City, Alabama. Ariana May, a childhood friend, remembered her as a sweet soul shy with strangers, radiant with those she loved. Devout in her Mormon faith, she poured her heart into church life, joining every activity, completing her seminary with unshakable belief. She left home, traveling 250 miles to the University of South Alabama on an Army scholarship, chasing a bold dream. But in her first semester, a sudden romance changed everything. She fell pregnant, chose to keep the baby, and walked away from school when her lover left, returning to Phoenix City with a heart in pieces. In that familiar church, Richie Wilder entered her world, charismatic, vibrant, a man with a clear path ahead. Angila fell for him, for the love he showered on her daughter. They married in January of 2009, eyes shining with promise, Richie eager to adopt the little girl as his own. But the joy faded fast. Richie joined the Air Force, leaving Angila with quiet fears. They moved to Minot Air Force Base, where she conceived again. After their son's birth, fights over raising their kids tore them apart. In that frozen land, they drifted, and by the spring of 2012, their marriage collapsed, leaving them to share their children through divided weeks. Angila returned to Alabama, reconnecting with Christopher, her high school sweetheart. A fleeting reunion left her pregnant, and he gave up everything to join her in Minot. They got engaged, their bond not loud with passion but deep with quiet respect. Angila trained as a nurse, driven by a fire to help others. Christopher worked nights at Walmart, building a life beside her. In 2013, their third child arrived amid smiles. By October of 2015, a fourth pregnancy sparked new hope. But 2 months later, police sirens shattered the dawn. Angila lay stabbed to death, her 19-month-old son bewildered in the next room. Sergeant David Goodman stood at the scene, hearing patrol officers murmur, "Why didn't Christopher go in?" He'd called 911 instead, a chilling detail that sparked doubt. If a loved one were in danger, who wouldn't charge in? They took him to the station, his gaze lost behind bars. Shannon Murphy, the neighbor, caught a glimpse of him in the squad car, her heart twisting, tears falling in helpless silence. Now, detectives dig into Angila's past, hunting the enemy lurking in the shadows.
If you go on, they've probably been through it. He doesn't like her, she doesn't like him.
I trust my husband 100%.
Well,
then you're wrong.
On the morning of November 13, 2015, the air in Minute hung heavy as police began examining the home of Angila Shannon Wilder, a woman of 30 years, just discovered brutally stabbed to death in her bedroom. The crime scene team waited in silence for orders, stepping into the scene with an unspoken dread. Her body lay cold and stiff, life gone for hours, her neck and chest riddled with deep, furious stab wounds, a storm of rage carved into her flesh. Blood painted a tale of desperation. She seemed to have been yanked from the bed in a final struggle. Her hands bore cuts, nails broken and jagged, faint echoes of resistance against the blade. They carefully gathered samples from her nails, clinging to the hope of unmasking her killer. She wore only a thin shirt and underwear, a bloody outline of a knife blade staining the fabric, a cruel taunt from the murderer, yet the weapon itself had vanished, leaving a mystery dangling in the stillness. Moving beyond the bedroom, they found the back door pried open, faint marks hinting at intrusion. The house remained orderly, untouched by theft, cloaked only in the hush of death. Once finished, her body was sent for autopsy. The findings chilled them. Nearly 40 slashes, a savage excess that spoke of personal vengeance too raw to be chance. The investigation turned to those closest to her. Her son of 19 months was handed to social services, while attention fixed on his father, Christopher Jackson. Suspicion flared. He hadn't entered the house, a choice that baffled them, for who wouldn't rush in, danger be damned? At the station, they faced him, pressing for every detail of that fateful night. He recounted starting his night shift at Walmart at 10 in the evening on Thursday, November 12. At midnight, he'd called her, her voice still calm and near. By 2 in the morning, another call. All seemed well. Then silence took her. No more answers. He told himself she was weary, sent a message of love, shared bits of his shift. When 7 in the morning came, he stepped out to the lot, expecting her familiar figure, but she wasn't there. His calls went unanswered, unease creeping in, and he took a taxi home. The sight of the shattered back door stopped him cold. Her car sat untouched. She hadn't left, should have picked up, but he didn't cross the threshold. A strange dread anchored him, despite his child and PHAANVN inside. Some reason he feared what lay beyond, a reaction no one could judge until faced with such terror. His tale flowed clearly, his demeanor open, yet the police held back trust. They sought confirmation from Walmart, took his DNA. He agreed without a pause. In a fleeting break, the camera captured him phoning Angila's sister. A name slipped out: Richie Wilder, tightening the air with tension. A question lingered: what did he know of Richie and the darkness tied to Angila's death? In Minute, North Dakota, a cold wind stirred as the PHAANVN murder victim Angila Shannon Wilder suddenly pointed to her ex-husband as a figure of suspicion. Detectives sprang into action, returning to the interrogation room, their sharp gazes pressing Christopher Jackson to peel back the layers of secrets he held. From his words, the marriage between Angila and Richie had shattered amid turmoil, leaving wounds that refused to fade. Even after parting ways, the fire of conflict smoldered on, erupting through ceaseless struggles over their children. Tension soared until they could no longer face each other for weekly handoffs. Angila's fear of Richie consumed her, her body trembling in panic at his shadow, forcing Christopher to step in, ferrying the kids to build a barrier between her and the man she once called husband. According to Christopher, Angila confided in him that her marriage to Richie ended under volatile circumstances. The air in the interrogation room grew thick with unease. The detectives knew they had to test every thread of Christopher's story, but now Richie Wilder loomed as a pressing enigma demanding answers. Their exchange with Christopher drew to a close, and mere hours later, Richie was ushered in, his steps eerily steady in the taut atmosphere. Told of Angila's death, he responded with a detached calm, as if the news were a fleeting breeze. Under relentless questioning, Richie acknowledged the stormy history with Angila, yet denied laying a hand on her. Instead, he struck back with a jolt, accusing her of mistreating their eldest daughter, claiming he'd reported her before ending their marriage. He insisted he'd never harm her, recounting a quiet evening with his new family, but the detective's eyes lingered, suspicion coiling tighter. Richie shifted the tale, speaking of Cyndi, his current wife, known fondly as such by those near her. Their paths crossed in 2012 at the Minute Vocational Center, where they worked part-time. His quirky charm hooked her from the start, prompting her to seek his number and lure him out that same night. Soon, they shared a roof, crafting a life that seemed serene. By April, she carried his child, and in August of 2013, they bound their lives in marriage. After their daughter arrived, Cyndi claimed her teaching degree from Minute State University, swiftly stepping into a kindergarten classroom. She immersed herself in the work, in the children's laughter, as if life had found its glow. Richie maintained that on that night, he rested beside Cyndi, swearing she could prove he never stirred. Yet a faint scratch on his cheek halted the detectives, a whisper of Angila's final fight uncovered in her autopsy. He brushed it off as play, agreeing to let them document it and sample his DNA. Warrants were issued for Richie's car and Cyndi's Honda Pilot. He slipped away in silence, but the web of doubt held firm. The detectives arrived at the elementary school where Cyndi taught, bearing news of Angila's fate. She listened with a face nearly untouched by emotion, unmoved by the tragedy. Asked to confirm, she recounted Richie's return near midnight, her awakenings through the night always finding him by her side. The investigation pressed forward with Cyndi's car. A small stain on the passenger door caught their eye, swabbed amid a tense hush. Yet searches of their home and Richie's vehicle revealed nothing of note, leaving a void steeped in mystery. As doubts about Richie and Cyndi swelled, the detective sought Angila's friends and family, probing the shadows of her past. Some recalled Richie's charges that Angila harmed their children, but they refuted it. She bore no such darkness. Her mother and sister branded him a liar, underscoring the violent rift between them. They revealed he'd once choked her in military housing, a crime that saw him court-martialed and cast out of the service in disgrace. Her family repeatedly pointed to Richie, naming him the one to hunt. A theory sharpened, Richie may have schemed to erase her, freeing himself from custody battles for good. His motive stood out starkly, yet evidence remained a phantom. Nearly a month later, the lab's DNA results crashed through. Blood from Cyndi's Honda Pilot door matched Angila's, a mark undeniable. Then, beneath Angila's nails, Richie's DNA emerged, tearing the veil of mystery with chilling truth. Nearly 1 month into the murder investigation of Angila Shannon Wilder, the air in Minute grew heavy as detectives uncovered evidence pinning her ex-husband, Richie Wilder, as the likely culprit. Beneath Angila's nails, a trace of DNA emerged, unmistakably Richie's, a silent scream tying him to her final moments. The faint scratch across his face seemed to echo her desperate fight, a mark too precise to ignore. Suspicion spread wider, ensnaring Richie's current wife, Cyndi, as Angila's blood stained the inside of her vehicle. The detective sensed a thread of guilt, yet the proof to bind her remained elusive, hovering just out of reach. For Richie, the net tightened. They believed the evidence stood firm enough to drag him before justice. On December 18th, the warrant arrived, guiding detectives to a local gym where Richie lingered. Clad in police vests, flanked by members of the Special Weapons and Tactics team, they closed in with quiet precision. Richie offered no resistance, but his first words demanded a lawyer, sealing his lips against their questions. With nothing more to pry from him, they booked him, locking him away in the Ward County Jail. That afternoon, Cyndi stepped into the suffocating glare of the interrogation room. Told her husband faced murder charges, she pushed back with fierce denial, her voice edged with defiance. She accused them of trying to shake her, but they countered that proof drove their hands. When pressed about the blood in her Honda, she feigned ignorance until the truth landed like a blow. It was Angila's, found within her car. She insisted Richie never left that night, claiming she'd risen multiple times and found him asleep. The detectives called her bluff, but she stood unyielding. Cyndi clung to her tale, a fortress against their probing. She refused to yield any hint of Richie's or her own darkness. Though suspicion coiled around her, the detectives saw no path to crack her story. Lacking grounds to hold her, they let her slip back into the fading daylight. Word of Richie's arrest rippled outward, stunning friends and family into disbelief. His mugshot flashed across social media, igniting a storm of whispers. People grappled with questions, piecing together how he could be linked to Angila's death. One reached out to Cyndi, seeking clarity amid the chaos. Her voice broke with anguish, swearing they'd gotten it wrong, painting Richie as a good man. Yet, in their shared moments, an unease lingered, a sense he held the reins, with Cyndi trailing in his wake. How much she knew or hid remained a shadow just beyond grasp. Time stretched on until March of 2016, for months past the tragedy, when a call from Richie's lawyer shifted the tide. He wanted to speak, to lay bare what happened. The detectives arrived at the Ward County Sheriff's Department, summoning Richie from his cell, his lawyer a silent sentinel at his side. His confession began, and with it, a finger pointed sharply at Angila's future spouse. Richie spun a wild tale, claiming Christopher had drawn him into a ruthless scheme to erase Angila. Both sought full custody of their children, he said, and Christopher suspected her of betrayal. On the night of November 13th, at 2 in the morning, a call from Christopher broke the stillness, urging Richie to join him. He dressed in haste, drove to Walmart, picked up Christopher, and together they returned to the house. They slipped inside, crossing the living room to the bedroom door. It swung open, revealing a shadowed form beneath the covers, but when they pulled it back, only a pillow lay beside Angila. Christopher lunged, his knife slashing down in a frenzy, while Richie froze, helpless as the horror unfolded. Tears streaked his face as he recounted the scene. He rushed to her, searching for a pulse amid the spreading blood. As his hands brushed her, she surged up, claws raking his face, her fading breath whispering love before she fell still. The detectives listened in silence, letting Richie weave his narrative, each word sinking him deeper into the pit he'd carved for himself. 3 months after his arrest for the murder of his ex-wife, Angila Wilder, a startling twist gripped minute as Richie called for a meeting with detectives, thrusting blame onto her fiancé, Christopher Jackson. In the stifling room, suspicion hung thick, a new chapter poised to unfold. Just 1 day before, the detectives had received a fresh wave of surveillance footage from Walmart, where Christopher had worked that fateful night. They pored over every moment, eyes locked on the screen, tracing each tick of time. Certainty solidified within them. Christopher never left, a fact carved in stone, casting a looming shadow over Richie's impending tale. Tension peaked as Richie glanced at his lawyer, who offered an escape. Silence was his right. He seized it, halting his words, the realization dawning that his story was a sinking ship, powerless to free him from the murder's weight. 9 months later, in December of 2016, the courtroom doors swung open for Richie Wilder's murder trial. He sat at the front, flanked by his lawyer, polished yet shadowed by a smugness that lingered in his gaze. The prosecution rose, wielding damning proof: Angila's blood in Cyndi's car, Richie's deoxyribonucleic acid beneath her nails, threads tying him to the crime. Yet a gap gnawed at their case, the murder weapon, lost to the void, a specter haunting their efforts. After 4 days of trial, the jury retreated, then returned, their verdict resolute: they judged him guilty. Relief washed over some as word spread. One soul found quiet triumph in the life sentence without parole that bound him. Amid the courtroom's hum, Cyndi's sobs echoed from the back, raw yet defiant. She'd staked her faith in her husband's goodness, unwilling to see him as the monster others did, her heart laced with a bitterness toward Angila. Whispers lingered: could she have played a part in the dark design? Cyndi sought the spotlight, tears streaming as she shared her grief, her voice a steadfast shield for Richie, proclaiming his innocence. To her, the case defied reason. He was a devoted father, a loving husband, incapable of such horror. Her pleas rang out, defiant against the gathering storm of doubt. 3 months later, a new thread unraveled the shadows. In March of 2017, Matt Walters, a friend of Cyndi's, approached the detectives, bearing secrets from a Facebook exchange. In those messages, Cyndi had let slip chilling hints: how the knife wasn't the first plan, a gun had been the intent, the blade merely a fallback, words that painted her not just as witness, but as conspirator. The detectives seized the moment, enlisting Matt to draw her out again, this time wired for sound. He agreed, rigging his car as a silent trap. They met at a local bar, hours slipping by in conversation, before driving back to linger in her driveway. There, in the stillness, Cyndi's guard fell. She spoke of a plan long in the making, a pact with Richie to end Angila's life. Pride swelled in her for him, marred only by frustration at his carelessness, the flaw that unraveled their 2-year scheme. 3 months after Richie Wilder was sentenced to life in prison for murdering his ex-wife Angila Wilder, the atmosphere in Minot, North Dakota pulsed with tension. Detectives wove a tightening web around his current wife, Cyndi, as her own words began to unravel, ensnaring her in the deadly plot she'd helped craft. Matt Walter's vehicle turned into a silent weapon, rigged with a recording device to coax out the truth. Through careful exchanges, Cyndi let slip her role, speaking of endless battles over the children with Angila. She revealed how custody had split them apart, how Angila's mother fueled the feud with harsh words, even summoning social services to target her and Richie. She recalled a moment in September of 2013, after a custody hearing, when a dark thought slipped from her lips to Richie: wouldn't life be simpler if Angila were gone? What began as a fleeting whisper grew into a rush of exhilaration, spiraling into a plan that would ignite that very night. The detectives listened, hearts pounding, as Cyndi recounted the 13th of November, the night their scheme came alive. She described Angila's fierce resistance, a desperate struggle for survival. Coldly, she mused that in her place, she'd have been merciless, severing Angila's fingers, burning them, even setting the house ablaze to erase all traces. She admitted standing by Rich's side, their plot meticulously laid, only undone by her own oversight, a single drop of blood left in the car. Her recorded confession rang out, a damning echo that armed prosecutors to charge her as a conspirator in the chilling crime. On the 19th of May, Detective Matthias and a colleague strode into Washington Elementary School, where Cyndi taught kindergarten, their eyes steely as they cuffed her. She offered no words, her silence mirroring Rich's when he'd faced the same fate, a wall against further revelation. By November of 2017, Cyndi stood in court, entering an Alford plea to conspiracy to commit murder. She acknowledged the evidence against her as overwhelming, enough to convict, yet stopped short of admitting guilt, a fragile shield in the storm of justice. In May of 2018, she faced sentencing, her last chance to plead before the gavel fell. The courtroom replayed her words to Matt about cutting off Angila's fingers and torching the house, each syllable a haunting reminder of her ruthlessness. She tried to soften it, claiming it was mere bravado, but the excuse fell flat. No one bragged about such savagery and walked unscathed. The judge delivered the harshest blow possible: life without parole, sealing her fate in shadow. Word reached those who knew her, one understood the justice, though grief weighed heavy for a daughter lost. Punishment fit, they felt, yet the wound remained raw. Some mused that alone, neither Richie nor Cyndi might have birthed this brutal act, but together, they fueled a deadly fire, each feeding the other's darkness. Voices suggested love could drive such madness, blinding them to consequence. Yet another pushed back: this wasn't love, true love had shone between Angila and Chris, while this was a twisted void, far from its light. In the end, one held firm that justice prevailed, hoping Angila would live on in memory as a woman of honor, kindness, and devotion, a mother to cherish, a beacon to admire.